This is the story of Gabriel by Marna Coldwater. Gabriel was in my division and third period classes. Division was like a class, like a homeroom for official attendance, paperwork, and announcements. It met between second and third period in order to accommodate the numerous tardy students into the average daily attendance, ADAs, for the state. Gabriel was the only kid in my division that had me for another class, too. It was one of those years that I was a traveling teacher and I didn't have my own classroom. I had to carry all my supplies and books and records from class to class. I felt like a donkey burdened with heavy loads most of the day. On one side, I carried my big bag with a giant record book, teacher's text for both of the curriculums I taught, world and American history, as well as other resources as needed. On the other side, I had my worksheet file box with a handle. We worked mainly from worksheets since there weren't enough textbooks for the whole class, let alone enough books for each student to take home for homework assignments. I had to keep copies of makeup work as well as current assignments because the attendance was so poor among many of my students. I needed to be able to give them makeup assignments on those days they happened to come to school. I would be a wide load coming down the corridor or squeezing my way up and down the crowded stairwells. Gabriel wasn't the kind of student to offer help to the teacher. He wasn't the kind of student a teacher would ask for help much from either. Although Gabriel and I both left room 304 after division and went directly to room 407 on the next floor up, he was always there ahead of me. I usually had to pack myself up and complete division paperwork to send to the attendance office before third hour. By the time I got up to the top floor classroom, Gabriel would be already there. His favorite position in the classroom was at the window. He always flung the window wide open so he could sit in its frame. Well, sometimes he would sit. Sometimes he would hang over the edge of the window by his waist. This position offered the best view of the sidewalks and street 4 stories below. He would shout or flash gang signs out the window at people and cars passing below. I learned to find ways to convince him to come out of the window. He did not respond to direct instruction. Gabriel didn't like being told what to do. The trick was to tell him to do something without telling him. Gabriel, would you give us the weather report? Gabriel, what's the traffic report, please? Or, Gabriel, please share with us that latest news. He liked being the center of attention, so he would move to the teacher position in front of the chalkboard, and I would move to the window and close it. Sometimes I could even get him to review the lesson from the day before, although he would usually need a general reminder of the history we were studying. Gabriel had a great memory for stories and history. His reading skills were okay too, and I would usually ask him to do any reading out loud because the other students would listen to him. He would reprimand sharply those that were not paying attention if he was doing the talking. I saw Gabriel arguing with one of the football coaches one day. He stood toe to toe, nose to nose with a man nearly 3 times his age. Gabriel stood over 6 feet tall, so he was about the same height as the coach. Sometimes Gabriel would let his braids out and tease up his hair and make his afro stand another 4 inches. He was quite a sight. Even though Gabriel was really skinny and not much of an athlete or a dancer, he had an electrical presence about him that would definitely turn heads. I don't know what he and the coach were arguing about that day. My guess would be that Gabriel may not have responded to the coach's correction very well. I knew better than to think the coach needed my help. I was struck by Gabriel's boldness and with the coach's patience. I can't argue with students. I get too emotional and angry. Coach must have known what he was doing, though. He'd been teaching for nearly 30 years. I admired the coach. He visited many of the local churches our students attended. It gave him more clout on the field and with the families of our athletes. Many of our kids' only hope was that athletics could take them out of the ghetto. The school had over 2,000 students and over 100 teachers. Everybody knew Gabriel. Gabriel, unlike many of my students, had excellent attendance. I found out from other teachers that he came to school to work. He was working for the local chapter of the Gangster Disciples, the GDs. Gabriel was professional. He didn't get in trouble very often with teachers. He usually used enough charm and enough knowledge of our various tolerance levels to walk that thin line between cracking us up and ticking us off. Gabriel recruited for the gang in school. He probably sold drugs too. His new shoes, designer black jeans, and Tommy Hilfiger labels worked like an advertising billboard for what his organization could do for your wallet. Gabriel was known to pull out a wad of bills to pay for lunches in the cafeteria, even though he and 98% of the other kids at the school qualified for free and reduced meals. When I first heard that Gabriel got shot, I felt dizzy and sick. The exploding bullet entered his back and exited his chest with a hole the size of a man's fist. It blew his stomach into pieces. He was on life support for months. His own gang had had him shot. Gabriel was skimming money from what he collected, or so the rumors said. They had left him on the street bleeding to death, but he didn't die. He was lucky the bullet missed his heart, but it tore into one of his lungs and ripped open his esophagus. I couldn't visit him in the hospital. I just couldn't. Gabriel came back to school the next year, though. He moved slowly, but he could walk. He couldn't turn his head smoothly from side to side. He had to turn his whole torso. His voice wasn't much above a whisper. He still had that spark in his eye, though. He still had a sense of humor and a sense of naughtiness, that's for sure. He was put into one of my history classes. I noticed that under his loose shirt he kept his feed bag. He wouldn't be able to feed himself orally anymore. We talked about how medical advancements would give him back regular digestion someday. Gabriel missed a lot of school. He was in and out of the hospital for surgeries and procedures. Sometimes I would sit in the desk near his and talk with him. He never stayed after class. I asked him to think about being a counselor or a gang prevention advocate. I referred him to the advocate at our school and hoped it would give him an outlet. Gabriel was no longer a member or a cheerleader of his organization. Gabriel came to school less and less until one day he didn't come back at all. He was 15.